In the 9th century, Viking warbands were terrorizing Britain and Ireland, launching devastating raids that left monasteries in ruins and kingdoms struggling for survival. These Norse warriors, arriving in their longships from Scandinavia, struck fear into the hearts of Christian rulers. While England faced the brutal assaults of the great heathen army, Ireland had its own Viking nightmare, one of fire, bloodshed, and conquest. Among the many Viking warlords who rampaged across the Emerald Isle, one name stood out: Thorgest. Known in some sources as Thorgest, he was more than just a raider. He sought to dominate Ireland itself. Unlike earlier Vikings who launched hit-and-run attacks, Thorgest established permanent strongholds, overthrew native Irish rulers, and even attempted to rule as a king. His forces seized key monastic centers, desecrated churches, and challenged the might of the Irish high kings like never before. Thorgest's origins remain somewhat mysterious, but he is believed to have come from Norway, leading a powerful fleet of longships. Unlike earlier raiders who struck and withdrew, Thorgest's ambitions were far greater. He sought to conquer and rule Ireland itself. When he arrived on Irish shores, possibly around the 830s or early 840s, the local Gaelic kingdoms were fragmented and often at war with one another. This disunity made Ireland a prime target for Viking expansion. Thorgest wasted no time in exploiting the situation. One of Thorgest's first and most infamous acts was the capture of major Irish monastic centers. At the time, monasteries were not only religious institutions, but also centers of learning, wealth, and power. Unlike the fortified towns of continental Europe, these Irish religious sites were largely defenseless, making them prime targets for Viking aggression. Thorgest led his warriors deep into the heart of Ireland, raiding and occupying Clonmacnoise and Armagh, two of the most sacred Christian sites in the country. His forces looted their treasures, burned their churches, and slaughtered monks who resisted. According to Irish sources, he seized Armagh for himself and his wife, turning it into his personal stronghold for several years. From his strongholds in the Midlands and North, Thorgest continued his campaign of terror. His forces moved across Ireland, targeting both monasteries and Irish strongholds. During this time, Thorgest forged alliances with other Norse warlords operating in Ireland, creating a formidable Viking network. He also brought his wife, a mysterious figure sometimes described as a Volva, a Norse sorceress who reportedly performed pagan rituals in the very churches they had captured. With each victory, Thorgest's power grew, and by the mid-840s, he was the most dominant Viking leader in Ireland. Some sources even suggest that he proclaimed himself ruler over large parts of the island, a title no Viking before him had dared to claim. But his growing power could not go unchallenged forever. The Irish, though divided among various kingdoms, began to rally against the Viking threat. Among the leaders who opposed him, one man would ultimately bring about his downfall: Máel Sechnaill Máele Ruanaid, the King of Meath and soon-to-be High King of Ireland. By the mid-840s, the tide was beginning to turn. Irish resistance against the Vikings was growing fiercer, and Thorgest's unchecked expansion had made him a primary target. Unlike earlier Viking raids, where Norse warbands struck isolated monasteries and retreated, Thorgest had overstretched his forces by establishing inland strongholds. According to Irish sources, Máel Sechnaill devised a cunning plan to eliminate Thorgest. Irish king lured Thorgest into a false sense of security, possibly by pretending to negotiate or offering submission. Others claim that Thorgest was ambushed during a raid, caught off guard by a well-coordinated Irish force. Whichever the case, the result was catastrophic for the Viking warlord. Thorgest was captured alive, an event that sent shockwaves through Viking ranks. The Irish were not content with simply killing Thorgest in battle. His execution needed to be symbolic, a clear message that the Irish were not to be ruled by Norse invaders. In a dramatic display of vengeance, Máel Sechnaill ordered Thorgest to be drowned in Lothbrok, a lake in modern-day County Westmeath. This method of execution was not accidental. Drowning was a fate reserved for criminals or those seen as grave threats. Thorgest's execution marked a turning point in the Viking presence in Ireland. His death shattered Norse ambitions of total dominance, at least for the time being. However, the Vikings were not driven out entirely. They adapted, shifting their focus toward coastal cities like Dublin, which they transformed into a powerful Norse stronghold.